My name is Ava Miller, and I'm 32 years old. As I sit here beside my 6-year-old son, Leo's hospital bed, watching his tiny chest struggle to rise and fall, I can barely remember what day it is. 3 days in the ICU has left me hollow-eyed and terrified. What started as pneumonia has turned into a nightmare no mother should face. The only sound besides the beeping monitors is my phone. The screen lights up, "Mom!" My stomach drops. I already know this call will change everything. Before I dive into what happened next, where are you watching from today? Hit subscribe, and like if you've ever had to choose between family expectations and protecting someone you love. To understand why a phone call from my mother would fill me with such dread during the worst moment of my life, you need to know our history. I became a single mom 4 years ago when my marriage to David ended. Leo was just 2 then. The divorce wasn't dramatic, more of a slow, painful recognition that we'd become different people who couldn't find our way back to each other. David moved to Seattle for work, sends child support regularly, and video calls Leo twice a week. He's not a bad father, just a distant one. Since then, it's been Leo and me against the world. We live in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Portland. I work as a graphic designer for a marketing firm that thankfully allows me to work remotely most days. We don't have much, but we have each other. Leo is my world, a curious, kind-hearted boy who collects rocks and can name every dinosaur that ever existed. His laugh could light up the darkest room. My relationship with my mother, Eleanor Sterling, has always been complicated. Growing up in our upper-middle-class home in Lake Oswego, appearances mattered above all else. Eleanor was the queen of the neighborhood, involved in every committee and charity function. Our home was immaculate, our clothes designer label, our achievements proudly displayed. But beneath that perfect surface ran currents of conditional love. Stand up straight, Ava. That A- isn't going to get you into an Ivy League school. Why can't you be more like your sister? These were the constant refrains of my childhood. My younger sister Sarah fit the mold perfectly. She got straight A's, was homecoming queen, married her college sweetheart from Stanford, and now lives 20 minutes from our parents with her 2 perfect children and investment banker husband. They have Sunday dinner with our parents every week. Her Christmas card photos look like they belong in a magazine. I was always the misfit, creative questioning, never quite meeting expectations. When I announced my intention to study art in college instead of business or law, Eleanor didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. When I fell in love with David, a teacher, with no family money or connections, she wore black to our wedding as if in mourning. And when I told her I was pregnant, her first question wasn't about my health or happiness, but whether we'd be moving to a suitable neighborhood. After my divorce, Eleanor made it clear she considered it a personal failing on my part. Marriages take work, Ava. Your generation gives up too easily. Never mind that she knew nothing about the private struggles David and I had faced. When I moved into the apartment with Leo, she offered financial help with strings attached. She would pay for private school for Leo and supplement my income, but in exchange, I was expected to attend every family function, consider her opinions on my parenting, and essentially surrender my independence. For Leo's sake, I accepted. The private school was excellent, and the extra money meant I could afford better health care and occasional special activities for him. But the cost was high. Every decision I made was questioned. Every family gathering became an opportunity for subtle criticism. Every time Leo had a sniffle or a scrape, it was somehow evidence of my inadequate mothering. Eleanor particularly excelled at using Sarah's birthday parties, holiday gatherings, and other family events as leverage. Missing any celebration was treated as a betrayal of family loyalty. 2 years ago, when I couldn't attend Sarah's anniversary party because Leo had strep throat, Eleanor didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Last Christmas, when we arrived 30 minutes late to dinner, because Leo's winter concert ran long, she served us cold food and made pointed comments about punctuality all evening. Despite all this, I tried to maintain a relationship with my family. Leo loved his grandparents, especially my father, Richard Sterling, who would sneak him cookies and tell him stories about his own childhood adventures. Richard was quieter, more gentle than Eleanor, though he rarely contradicted her directly. He would sometimes call me privately to check in our conversations, brief but meaningful. Things had been relatively peaceful for the past few months. I'd gotten better at navigating Eleanor's expectations, keeping conversations superficial, and limiting our visits. Leo was thriving in school, making friends, and growing more confident every day. I'd even started dating occasionally. Nothing serious, just coffee with nice men who made me laugh and remember I was more than just Leo's mom. Then, 3 days ago, everything changed. Leo had been fighting what seemed like a normal cold for about a week. Runny nose, slight cough, nothing alarming. I kept him home from school, gave him children's cold medicine, and made chicken soup. But on Tuesday morning, he woke up gasping for breath, his lips tinged slightly blue. I've never been so terrified. I called 911, then held him in my arms, whispering that everything would be okay, while my entire body shook with fear. The ambulance ride was a blur. At the hospital, doctors rushed him away, while I stood helpless, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. The diagnosis came quickly: severe pneumonia with complications. The infection had spread rapidly, causing fluid to build up in his lungs. He needed to be intubated and placed in the pediatric ICU immediately. I signed forms without reading them, nodding mechanically, as doctors explained risks and procedures. And that's how I found myself here in this sterile room, with its beeping machines and antiseptic smell, watching my beautiful boy fight for each breath, wondering if I'd ever hear him laugh again. The pediatric ICU exists in its own time dimension. Days blend into nights, punctuated only by the rotation of medical staff and the steady rhythm of vital sign checks. Leo lay in a bed that seemed to swallow his small frame tubes running from his arms, nose and mouth, connecting him to machines that breathed for him and monitored every flutter of his heart. The ventilator made a whooshing sound as it pushed air into his lungs. The sound both comforted and terrified me, proof he was still breathing, but a constant reminder that he couldn't do it on his own. His face was swollen, eyes closed, skin pale, except for the feverish flush across his cheeks. I hardly recognized my vibrant boy beneath the medical equipment. Dr. Chen, the pediatric intensivist, explained Leo's condition with gentle frankness. The bacterial pneumonia has caused significant inflammation in both lungs. We're giving him powerful antibiotics, but his body is struggling to fight the infection. The next 72 hours will be critical. When I asked what that meant, critical, she placed her hand on mine. It means we're doing everything we can, but his condition is very serious. His oxygen levels are lower than we'd like, and his body is working extremely hard. Children are resilient, Ms. Miller, but I want you to understand the severity of the situation. I nodded, unable to form words around the lump in my throat. After she left, I broke down sobbing silently into my hands so the nurses wouldn't see. I couldn't lose him. I wouldn't survive it. The hospital provided a reclining chair beside Leo's bed, where I spent the first night refusing to leave, even when the nurses gently suggested I go home to shower and rest. I couldn't bear the thought of him waking up alone and afraid, or worse, the thought that if I left even for an hour, something irreversible might happen in my absence. So I stayed dozing fitfully between nurse checks and beeping alarms. My friend Chloe brought me a change of clothes, dry shampoo, toothbrush, and phone charger on the second day. She hugged me tightly and offered to stay, but I sent her away. I couldn't manage my own emotions and someone else's concerns simultaneously. Everything non-essential had been stripped away by the crisis. Only Leo mattered. During rare moments when his condition seemed stable, I'd hold his small hand and talk to him, hoping somewhere in his unconscious state he could hear me. I told him stories about the dinosaurs we'd see when he got better. I reminded him of our upcoming summer plans to visit the coast. I promised him ice cream for breakfast, superhero movies past bedtime, anything he wanted, just please, please fight. Between these one-sided conversations, memories flooded back: Leo at 3, jumping in puddles, and laughing when the water splashed up. Leo, at 4, solemnly explaining to me why T-Rex couldn't brush his teeth properly. "Their arms are too short, Mommy. Tut." Leo, just last month, proudly showing me the science project he'd completed mostly on his own. Each memory was both comfort and torture, evidence of the beautiful soul lying still before me. On the evening of the second day, Eleanor and my father Richard made a brief appearance. Richard looked genuinely distressed, his eyes red-rimmed as he gazed at his grandson. He squeezed my shoulder wordlessly, the gesture conveying more support than any platitude could have. Eleanor, however, seemed more uncomfortable than concerned. She stood at the foot of the bed, clutching her designer purse like a shield. "This place is dreadful," she whispered, as if the hospital's lack of aesthetic appeal was the problem. Surely they could make it less depressing. She stayed for exactly 15 minutes, asked no questions about Leo's condition, and told me I looked terrible before leaving. Richard lingered a moment longer, pressing a $20 bill into my hand for the cafeteria, before Eleanor called him to hurry up. After they left, a kind nurse named Maria brought me a real coffee and a sandwich. "Family can be interesting during crisis," she said diplomatically. I managed a weak smile in response. That night, Leo's fever spiked dangerously high. Doctors and nurses rushed in, administering medication, adjusting settings, speaking in urgent tones. Dr. Chen was called in despite the late hour. I stood pressed against the wall, trying to stay out of the way while remaining as close as possible. "His body is fighting hard," Dr. Chen told me afterward. "But the infection is stubborn. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot about how he'll respond to treatment." I nodded, numb with fear. After she left, I crawled into the recliner, pulled my knees to my chest, and prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. The next morning, day 3, brought no improvement. If anything, Leo looked worse. The nurses' expressions grew more concerned, their movements more urgent. Dr. Chen ordered additional tests and adjusted his medications. I existed in a fog of fear, surviving on vending machine snacks and lukewarm coffee. That's when my phone rang. The first time, Eleanor. I let it go to voicemail, unable to muster the energy for her particular brand of support. She called again 20 minutes later. Again, I didn't answer. Then came the text. "Call me when you're ready to discuss when you'll be resuming normal life. This has gone on long enough." I stared at the message, disbelieving. Normal life, as if I were on some self-indulgent vacation, rather than keeping vigil by my critically ill child's bedside. I turned my phone off and focused back on Leo, counting each rise and fall of his chest like a precious gift. But an hour later, I turned it back on, afraid the school might call with questions about Leo's absence, or that David might be trying to reach me after my brief text explaining the situation. That's when the third call came through, Eleanor's name, flashing on the screen like a warning. I stepped into the hallway to take the call, not wanting the negative energy anywhere near Leo. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Ava, finally!" Eleanor's voice was sharp with impatience. "I've been trying to reach you all day. I'm at the hospital, Mom." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. "Yes, I know that," she sighed dramatically. "But tomorrow is Sarah's birthday, and I need you to come help with preparations. The caterer arrives at 10 Horzers, and I need someone to supervise while I pick up the cake and flowers." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Surely she couldn't be serious. "Mom, I can't leave the hospital. Leo is in critical condition." "Oh, Ava!" Her tone shifted to the one she'd used throughout my childhood, when I was being difficult. "Children get sick all the time. The doctors and nurses are taking care of him. You sitting there staring at him isn't making any difference." The casual cruelty of her words struck me like a physical blow. I gripped the phone tighter, pressing it against my ear, as if the pressure could somehow make her understand. "He's fighting for his life!" My voice cracked. "The doctors say the next 24 hours are crucial. I can't and won't leave him." "This is exactly your problem," Eleanor continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "You've always been so dramatic. Remember when you had that appendectomy in college? Your father and I flew across the country, canceled our anniversary cruise, and when we arrived, you were sitting up eating Jell-O sauce. Hi, I was 19 then, and this is completely different. Leo is 6 years old with severe pneumonia. He's on a ventilator. Do you understand what that means? A machine is breathing for him." There was a brief silence, and for a fleeting moment, I thought perhaps I'd gotten through to her. Then, "Well, I'm sure he's getting excellent care. That's why we pay for that premium health insurance for you, too. But family obligations don't just disappear because of illness, Ava. Your sister only turns 35 once. We have 30 people coming, including the Hendersons and Judge Williams. It's important. The familiar feeling washed over me, the mixture of rage, disbelief, and bone-deep hurt that only my mother could inspire. All my life, I'd tried to meet her impossible standards, to earn approval that was always withheld. Even now, with my child hovering between life and death, her priorities remained unchanged. "I'm not leaving my son," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "If the party is so important, hire someone to help or ask one of Sarah's friends." "Hired help isn't the same as family," Eleanor said, her voice taking on the martyred tone I knew so well. "This is about loyalty, Ava, about showing up when it matters. I've never missed a single important moment in your life despite whatever else was happening." This was patently untrue. She'd missed my college graduation because it conflicted with her garden club's annual fundraiser. She'd left my art show opening early because she had a hair appointment. She'd even been late to the hospital when Leo was born because she needed to finish hosting a charity luncheon. "Mom," I said, trying one last time to make her understand, "the doctors say Leo might not." My voice broke, unable to form the unthinkable words. "I need to be here. Please try to understand." "What I understand is that you're using the situation as an excuse," she said coldly, "just like you used your divorce as an excuse to miss the Wilsons' anniversary party. Just like you use work as an excuse when you don't want to attend family dinners." I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. For years, I'd contorted myself to fit into the shape my mother demanded, accepting her financial help, because it meant a better life for Leo, swallowing my pride and my truth to keep the peace. But standing here in this hospital hallway, with my son fighting for each breath, just feet away, something finally broke free inside me. "This isn't about excuses," I said quietly. "This is about my child who is gravely ill. If you can't understand that, then there's nothing more to say." "Well," she said after a moment, her voice chilling, "I think you need to consider very carefully what you're doing right now. Your father and I have been extremely generous, paying for Leo's private school, helping with your rent when you've fallen short. If you can't fulfill basic family obligations in return, perhaps it's time we reconsidered that arrangement." The threat hung between us, clear and unmistakable. For a second, panic fluttered in my chest. Without their help, I'd struggle to maintain Leo's current standard of living. His school alone cost more than my monthly rent. But then, I looked through the window of his hospital room, my beautiful boy fighting with every cell in his tiny body just to stay in this world. What message would I send him if I left his side now for a birthday party? What lesson would he learn about priorities, about love? "I'm not leaving him," I repeated. "Then you're cut off," Eleanor snapped. "Don't come crying to us when you can't afford his tuition or your car breaks down again. You've made your choice." In that moment, something crystallized within me, a clarity I'd never experienced before. All these years, I'd confused financial support with love, allowed myself to be manipulated and controlled because I believed I needed what my parents provided. But watching Leo these past 3 days, witnessing his pure, fierce fight to live, had taught me what really mattered. "Yes," I said, "I have." I ended the call, then immediately blocked her number. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. Whatever came next, whatever financial hardships or adjustments we faced, we would face them together, Leo and I, if he survived. When he survived. I walked back into his room, took my place beside his bed, and held his hand with a new resolve burning in my heart. Less than an hour after I blocked my mother's number, Leo's monitor started shrieking. His oxygen levels plummeted suddenly, his small body convulsing as he fought against the ventilator. I stood frozen in terror as medical staff rushed into the room. "He's crashing!" someone shouted. "Get Dr. Chen now." A nurse gently but firmly guided me outside. "We need room to work," she explained, her eyes kind but urgent. "Wait here. Someone will update you as soon as possible." I stood in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, watching through the window as a team of doctors and nurses surrounded my son. They moved with practiced efficiency, administering medications, adjusting equipment, calling out numbers and terms I didn't understand. Someone pulled the privacy curtain blocking my view. My legs gave out, and I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold linoleum floor. This couldn't be happening. Not my Leo. Not my bright-eyed boy who just last week had built a dinosaur city out of cardboard boxes in our living room. Not the child who kissed my cheek every night and whispered, "I love you to the moon and all the way back, Mommy." As I sat there, time seemed to fracture. I was suddenly back in the delivery room 6 years ago, hearing Leo's first angry cry as he entered the world. I remembered looking down at his red, wrinkled face, making silent promises I intended to keep forever. I would protect him. I would put him first. I would be the mother he deserved. Now those promises felt like ashes in my mouth. What kind of protection could I offer against an infection ravaging his lungs? What could I do but sit here useless and terrified while strangers fought to keep him alive? The truth hit me with stunning clarity. I was completely alone. I'd just cut ties with my mother, and by extension, likely my entire family. David was thousands of miles away. My friends, though caring, had their own lives and families. If the unthinkable happened, if Leo didn't survive, I would face that abyss with no safety net. And yet, oddly, the thought didn't frighten me as much as it should have. The worst had already happened the moment Leo's monitors started screaming. Nothing, not financial security, not family approval, not anything, mattered except his survival. First time in the PQ, I looked up to find a woman about my age sitting on a nearby chair. She had dark circles under her eyes and was clutching a foam coffee cup like a lifeline. I nodded, unable to form words. "My daughter Lily," she said, gesturing to a room across the hall. "Severe asthma attack, 3rd time this year." "I'm sorry," I managed. "Me too," she paused. "My parents think Lily's asthma is because I'm a bad housekeeper. Haven't spoken to them in 2 years." She shrugged. "Sometimes crisis shows you who people really are." Before I could respond, Dr. Chen emerged from Leo's room, her face etched with fatigue, but calm. I scrambled to my feet. "We've stabilized him," she said. "His lungs were struggling to work with the ventilator, so we've adjusted the settings and given him additional medication to help. His fever is still very high, which concerns me, but he's fighting hard." "Can I go back in?" I asked. She nodded. "Of course. Talk to him. Let him hear your voice." As I moved toward the door, the woman called after me. "Hey, I'm Jessica, room 412 if you need anything." I turned back. "Ava, and thank you." Back at Leo's bedside, the room quieter now that the crisis had passed, I took his small hand in mine. His skin felt hot and dry, his fingers limp. The ventilator continued its rhythmic whooshing, the monitors their steady beeping. I stroked his forehead, brushing back the damp hair. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. "You really scared me there. But I know you're fighting so hard. I'm right here, Leo. I'm not going anywhere. Not for anything or anyone." As the night deepened around us, nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medications, recording data. One brought me a blanket and a fresh cup of coffee. Another quietly shared that her own son had been in the PICU with pneumonia years ago and was now a healthy college student. Small kindnesses that felt like lifelines in the darkness. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Mom's furious. Says you're being selfish. What's going on? Is Leo really that sick?" I stared at the message, feeling a complex mix of anger and sadness. Even now, even with Leo critically ill, the narrative being spun was about my selfishness. I thought about responding, explaining just how close we'd come to losing him tonight, but exhaustion overtook me. I turned the phone face down without replying. As dawn approached, I dozed fitfully in the recliner, waking at every change in the monitor's rhythm or Leo's breathing pattern. During one such moment of wakefulness, I noticed a new text notification. Reluctantly, I checked it. It was a photo from Sarah's social media elaborate decorations for tomorrow's birthday party with the caption, "Birthday celebrations," beginning, "Wish everyone could be here, South blessed. Perfect day, South family." Not a single mention of her nephew fighting for his life. Not a word about postponing the celebration during a family crisis. Just business as usual in the picture-perfect world my mother had created. A wave of grief washed over me. Not for the loss of financial support or family connection, but for the realization that those connections had never been what I thought they were. What I'd interpreted as love had been transaction. What I'd seen as support had been control. A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. It's hard, isn't it, when the people who should love us the most don't know how? I looked up to find Maria, the night nurse, checking Leo's V. My abuela was the same way, she continued quietly. Nothing I did was ever good enough. When I became a nurse instead of a doctor, she didn't speak to me for a year. She shrugged. But you know what some family we're born into, some we choose, and some, she nodded toward Leo, some choose us. As she left, I pondered her words, watching the first pale light of dawn filter through the window blinds. We'd made it through the night, the darkest, longest night of my life, and somehow, in the midst of this terrible crisis, I felt the first tentative stirrings of something unexpected freedom. I leaned close to Leo's ear. It's a new day, sweet boy, I whispered. Let's face it together. And as if in response, though, he remained unconscious, his fingers twitched slightly in my hand. Dr. Chen arrived with her team for morning rounds, just after 7. They examined Leo thoroughly, reviewing his vitals and test results from overnight. I stood anxiously nearby, trying to interpret their expressions for any sign of hope or concern. His oxygen levels have improved slightly, Dr. Chen finally said, turning to me. And the latest blood work shows the antibiotics may be starting to work. The white blood cell count is still elevated, but less dramatically than yesterday. What does that mean? I asked, afraid to hope. It means he's moving in the right direction. He's still very ill, she cautioned. But these are positive signs. We're going to continue the current treatment protocol and monitor him closely. If this trend continues, we might be able to reduce his sedation slightly later today. It wasn't a declaration of victory, but after days of grim updates, even this cautious optimism felt like a gift. I thanked her, my voice thick with emotion. After the medical team left, I went to the small family bathroom to splash water on my face and brush my teeth. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed pale, with dark circles that made her look 10 years older. I barely recognized myself. When I returned to Leo's room, I was shocked to find someone sitting in my chair. It took me a moment to register who it was. Dad. Richard Sterling looked up, his weathered face creased with concern. At 65, he appeared older than his years, his once dark hair now completely silver. His tall frame slightly stooped. He was holding Leo's hand gently, as if afraid he might break it. Ava! He stood up awkwardly. I hope it's okay that I'm here. Of course, I said, still surprised. But how did you, after yesterday with Mom? He sighed heavily. Your mother doesn't know I'm here. She's at home overseeing the party preparations. He looked down at Leo. This is where I need to be right now. I felt tears spring to my eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. Throughout my childhood, Richard had been the quiet parent, the one who went along with Eleanor's demands to keep the peace. His small acts of kindness, a wink across the dinner table when she criticized my clothes, a secretly funded art class when she insisted on debate club instead, had been lifelines. But he'd never directly opposed her. Until now. How is he? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. They think he might be improving a little, I said. The antibiotics might be starting to work. Richard nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket. I brought some things, thought they might help. He pulled out Leo's favorite book, a well-worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, and the small stuffed triceratops that usually sat on his bedside table at home. How did you get these? I asked, taking them with trembling hands. I still have the spare key you gave me last year, he admitted. I thought familiar things might help him find his way back. I placed the dinosaur next to Leo's pillow and the book on the bedside table, then impulsively hugged my father. He stiffened momentarily. Physical affection had never been common in our family, then hugged me back fiercely. I'm so sorry, Ava, he whispered, for everything, for not standing up for you more, for letting your mother. It's okay, Dad, I said, though we both knew it wasn't. Not really. He pulled back, wiping his eyes quickly, as if embarrassed by the emotion. No, it's not. But we can talk about that later. Right now, this little guy is what matters. He looked back at Leo. Can I stay a while? Please, I said. Richard settled into the second chair the nurses had brought in, and for the next few hours, we maintained a quiet vigil together. He read Where the Wild Things Are, his gentle voice filling the room. He told stories about his own childhood that I'd never heard before. Adventures in the woods behind his parents' farm, the stray dog he'd secretly fed for an entire summer, the time he'd gotten lost at the state fair. During a lull in conversation, I finally asked the question that had been hovering between us. Has Mom always been this way? So controlling? Richard looked down at his hands. Not always. When we first met, she was ambitious, yes, but also passionate, full of life. She wanted to travel to experience everything. He sighed. But then her father got sick during our first year of marriage. Cancer. And her mother just fell apart. Couldn't handle any of it. Eleanor had to step in, manage everything. The medical decisions, the finances, the funeral arrangements. He paused, lost in memory. Something changed in her after that, like she decided the only way to prevent disaster was to control every detail of life. And when that wasn't possible, he trailed off. She panics and lashes out. I finished. Yes. He looked at me sadly. It doesn't excuse how she's treated you, Ava, or what she said yesterday. I wish I understood it better myself. As we talked, a nurse came in to check Leo's vital signs. His temperature is down 0.5 degree, she noted. That's good news. Throughout the day, Richard and I took turns sitting closest to Leo, talking to him, reading to him. My father insisted I go to the cafeteria for a proper meal, staying with Leo, so he wouldn't be alone. When I returned, I found Richard with tears streaming down his face, whispering something to his grandson I couldn't quite hear. In the late afternoon, my phone lit up with a barrage of messages. Evidently, word of my defection from family duties had spread. Aunt Cynthia texted that I should apologize to my mother. Cousin Rachel sent a passive-aggressive, thinking of you during this difficult time message that somehow made it clear which difficult time she meant. My ostracism, not my son's illness. Even my brother-in-law Ben weighed in with a curt, family should come first. I showed some of the messages to Richard, who shook his head in dismay. They don't know, he said simply. They only hear Eleanor's version. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a social media notification. Sarah had posted photos of her birthday party preparations, the elegant decorations, the catered food, the professionally arranged flowers, all exactly as Eleanor had envisioned. The caption read, "Birthday celebrations beginning wish everyone could be here, Djark family first." The irony of that hashtag wasn't lost on me. I put the phone away without commenting. Richard stayed until evening, when visiting hours officially ended. Though the PACU allowed parents to remain 24/7, other visitors had to leave. Before going, he pressed an envelope into my hand. "What's this?" I asked. "Something to help," he said. "Don't tell your mother." After he left, I opened it to find $500 in cash and a note. "For whatever you need, I'm here for you both. Love, Dad." I tucked the envelope into my bag, overcome with gratitude for this small act of rebellion from a man who'd spent decades avoiding conflict. As night fell, I settled back into the routine of the PICU. Maria was on shift again, and she brought me a fresh blanket and pillow. "Your papa seems like a good man," she observed. "He is," I agreed. "Just complicated." She nodded knowingly. "Most families are. But you know what I've learned in 15 years of nursing? Blood doesn't always make a family. Love does. Actions do." She checked Leo's IV line. "The people who show up when it matters, those are your real family." After she left, I pondered her words. Throughout this crisis, who had shown up Richard breaking decades of pattern to support us? Jessica, the mother from across the hall, who understood without explanation. Maria and the other nurses who offered kindness, along with medical care. Chloe, who'd brought supplies without being asked. Even Dr. Chen, who always spoke to Leo directly, as if he could hear respecting him as a person, not just a patient. Family, it seemed, could be found in unexpected places. I was dozing lightly when I felt it, the slightest pressure against my palm. I opened my eyes, suddenly alert. Leo's fingers had curled around mine, a weak but deliberate grasp. "Leo," I whispered, hardly daring to hope. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. The grip on my hand tightened fractionally. I pressed the call button, and Maria came running. "I think he squeezed my hand," I told her, voice trembling with excitement. She checked his vitals, then smiled broadly. "His numbers are looking better, and see here." She pointed to a monitor I didn't understand. "He's initiating some breaths on his own, working with the ventilator instead of against it." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said, squeezing my shoulder, "that your boy is finding his way back." As she left to notify the doctor, I leaned close to Leo's ear. "That's it, buddy," I whispered. "Keep fighting. I'm right here waiting for you. We're going to be okay, just you and me, I promise." And in that moment, I believed it with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, whether financial struggles or family estrangement, we would face it together. The clarity I'd found in crisis wouldn't fade with relief. Some changes once made couldn't be unmade. Some truths, once seen, couldn't be unseen. I pressed a gentle kiss to Leo's forehead, now cooler than it had been in days, and settled back in my chair, his hand still in mine, to wait for morning. The room was bathed in early morning sunlight when it happened. I'd been reading aloud from Where the Wild Things Are My Voice, hoarse from hours of one-sided conversation, when I noticed Leo's eyelids fluttering more intensely than before. I paused mid-sentence, hardly daring to hope. "Leo, can you hear me, buddy?" The fluttering continued, accompanied by slight movements of his fingers against my palm. I pressed the call button, and a nurse I hadn't met before, her badge read Maya, came quickly. "I think he's trying to wake up," I said, my heart pounding. She checked his vital signs and nodded encouragingly. "His numbers look good. The doctor reduced his sedation last night based on his improvement." She leaned over Leo. "Leo, can you open your eyes for us, sweetie?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, his eyelids lifted. Just a fraction. Just enough to reveal a sliver of the warm brown eyes I'd been desperate to see again. They were unfocused, confused, but unmistakably alert. "Leo!" I cried, tears streaming down my face. "It's Mom, I'm right here." His eyes found mine, recognition flickering across his face. He tried to speak, but the ventilator tube prevented it. Panic flashed in his eyes. It's okay," I soothed quickly. "There's a tube helping you breathe. Don't try to talk. You're in the hospital, but you're getting better." The nurse called for Dr. Chen, who arrived minutes later. After examining Leo thoroughly, she smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her. "This is excellent progress," she said. "His oxygen levels have improved significantly, and his latest labs show the infection is responding well to treatment. If he continues like this, we might be able to extubate him later today." "Xiao." I could hardly process her words through my overwhelming relief. Leo was awake. He was improving. The nightmare might actually be ending. Throughout the morning, Leo drifted in and out of consciousness, each waking period slightly longer than the last. The respiratory therapist came to perform tests, nodding with satisfaction at the results. Nurses adjusted his medications, explaining that they were weaning him off the sedatives now that he was breathing more on his own. Around noon, Dr. Chen returned with a team of specialists. "We're going to remove the breathing tube," she explained to both of us. "It won't be comfortable, Leo, but it will be quick, and you'll feel much better afterward." I held his hand tightly as they performed the procedure, wincing at his muffled sounds of discomfort. But when it was done, when the tube was out and replaced with a simple oxygen mask, the relief on his face was palpable. "Water." He rasped his first word in 4 days. A nurse brought ice chips, which I carefully spooned into his mouth. He closed his eyes in relief as they melted on his tongue. "More," he whispered. After he'd had enough ice chips, he looked at me with tired but clear eyes. "Mommy," he said, his voice barely audible. "I love you." And that's when I broke down, completely sobbing with relief and joy and lingering fear and 1,000 other emotions I couldn't name. I carefully gathered him into my arms, mindful of the IV lines and monitors still attached to his small body. "I love you too, buddy," I choked out. So much." He drifted back to sleep soon after, but this was different from the heavy sedation of before. This was healing sleep, his breathing deeper and more regular, his face peaceful instead of strained. In the quiet that followed, I stepped outside to call Richard. He answered on the first ring. "Ava, is everything okay?" "He's awake, Dad," I said, my voice breaking. "They took out the breathing tube. He's talking." I heard him exhale sharply. "Thank God." "Oh, thank God. Can you come back today? I think he'd like to see you." "Of course," he said immediately. "I'll be there in an hour." When I returned to the room, I found Jessica, the mother, from across the hall, standing in the doorway. "I heard the good news," she said, smiling. "The nurses are terrible gossips." I laughed, the sound strange after so many days of tension and fear. "He's going to be okay. I'm so glad." She hesitated. "We're being discharged today. Lily's doing much better. I just wanted to say goodbye." And she handed me a slip of paper. "My number if you ever want to talk about difficult mothers or sick kids or anything else." I took it gratefully. "Thank you for everything." After she left, I checked my phone and found a text from Sarah. "Need to talk to you. Mom told everyone you abandoned the family. What's really going on?" This time, I decided to respond. I sent her a photo of Leo in his hospital bed, still connected to monitors, but without the ventilator, sleeping peacefully. I added, "This is what's going on. He nearly died, Sarah. He's finally turning a corner today. Happy birthday, by the way." I didn't expect an immediate response, but my phone rang less than a minute later. "Ava?" Sarah's voice was hesitant. "Is that really Leo? Is he really that sick?" "Yes," I said simply. "Severe pneumonia with complications. He's been in the PICU for 4 days. They just removed the breathing tube a couple hours ago." "Oh my God!" She sounded genuinely shocked. "Mom said he just had a cold, that you were being dramatic to get out of helping with the party." A cold, bitter laugh escaped me. "Of course she did." "I'm so sorry," Sarah said. "I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me?" "I've been a little busy trying to keep my son alive," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Right, of course." She paused awkwardly. "Oh, is there anything I can do?" I softened slightly at the genuine concern in her voice. "Not right now, but thanks for asking. The party was—" She hesitated. "It was awful, actually. Mom was in a terrible mood, snapping at everyone. She kept making these passive-aggressive comments about family loyalty. Dad disappeared for hours and came back with some story about the car needing service." I smiled at that, imagining Richard inventing an excuse to come to the hospital. "Listen," Sarah continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "What she did, cutting you off financially when Leo was so sick, that's not okay. I didn't know the whole story before, but now I want you to know I don't agree with her." The admission stunned me. Sarah had always been Eleanor's perfect daughter, the one who followed all the rules, who never questioned or challenged. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "I should go," she said, still whispering. "She might hear me. But keep me updated about Leo, okay? And Ava, I'm really glad he's getting better." After we hung up, I sat in quiet contemplation, processing this unexpected development. Had my sister always had these independent thoughts buried beneath her perfect facade? Had she too been controlled by Eleanor's manipulation, just in a different way? Richard arrived as promised, bringing more of Leo's favorite things from home: his dinosaur encyclopedia, his special blanket, the Star Wars pajamas he loved. When Leo woke up again, his face lit up at the sight of his grandfather. "Grandpa," he whispered, his voice still weak but clear. Richard's eyes filled with tears. "Hey, sport, you gave us quite a scare." "I was really sick," Leo said solemnly. "You sure were, but you're tough just like your mom." Richard stayed for hours reading to Leo, helping him sip water, and regaling him with stories that made him smile despite his exhaustion. When Leo fell asleep again, Richard turned to me. "He looks so much better," he said. I nodded. "The doctor thinks he might be able to move out of the PICU tomorrow if he continues improving." "That's wonderful news." He hesitated. "Ava, there's something I need to tell you. I've been thinking about this for a long time, even before all this happened." "What is it?" I asked, noting the serious expression on his face. "I'm leaving your mother." The words hung in the air between us, momentous, and yet somehow not surprising. I've stayed far too long in a marriage that stopped being loving years ago, he continued. Watching you stand up to her, seeing you put Leo first, no matter the cost, it gave me courage. Life is too short to live without love and respect. I reached for his hand. Are you sure, Dad? He nodded. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and I want you to know, regardless of what happens with the divorce settlement, I'll make sure you and Leo are taken care of. Your mother can cut you off, but I won't. I don't want to come between you, I began. But he stopped me. You're not. This has been building for decades. What happened with you and Leo was just the final push I needed. He squeezed my hand. You showed me what real love looks like, Ava. The kind that puts someone else's needs before your own comfort or convenience. I want to live the rest of my life with that kind of honesty. I felt tears spring to my eyes again. Tears of gratitude, of relief, of love for this quiet man who had finally found his voice. I love you, Dad, I said simply. I love you too, sweetheart. Both of you. As the day progressed, Leo continued to improve. His appetite returned slightly. He managed a few spoonfuls of Jell-O and sips of apple juice. The nurses removed some of the monitoring equipment, allowing him more freedom of movement. By evening, he was even able to sit up a little propped against pillows to look at his dinosaur book. Dr. Chen confirmed that if his improvement continued overnight, he would be transferred to the regular pediatric ward the next day. He's not out of the woods yet, she cautioned. He'll need continued IV antibiotics and close monitoring, but the worst is behind us. As night fell, and Richard reluctantly left, promising to return the next day, I settled into what had become my routine, preparing for another night in the hospital chair. But this night was different. This night held hope. Leo woke briefly around midnight, reaching for my hand in the darkness. Mommy, he whispered. I'm here, buddy. Are we going to be okay? The question, so innocent, yet so profound, caught me off guard. Was he asking about his health, our financial situation, the family tension? In the end, I suppose it didn't matter. The answer was the same. Yes. I told him with absolute certainty. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be wonderful. He seemed satisfied with that, his eyes drifting closed again. But before he fell fully asleep, he murmured, I love you to the moon and all the way back, Mommy. I love you to the moon and all the way back, Leo, I whispered. Always. 1 week after Leo's dramatic awakening, we were finally going home. The intervening days had been filled with steady improvement, moving from the PICU to the regular pediatric ward, transitioning from IV to oral antibiotics, regaining strength enough to walk short distances and eat regular meals. Each milestone felt like a miracle after coming so close to losing him. Dr. Chen completed her final examination, listening to Leo's lungs with her stethoscope. Much clearer, she announced with satisfaction. You've made an excellent recovery, young man. Leo beamed at the praise. Some of his natural energy had returned, though he tired easily and still needed frequent rest. His cheeks had regained their healthy color, and the spark had returned to his eyes. Can I go back to school soon? He asked eagerly. Not quite yet, Dr. Chen replied. You'll need to rest at home for at least another week, then we'll see how you're doing. But I have a feeling you'll be back with your friends before you know it. As she prepared the discharge paperwork, I gathered our belongings. The accumulation of a week's hospital stay, plus all the items Richard had brought from home. The thought of returning to our apartment filled me with both relief and anxiety. Relief to be leaving the hospital behind, anxiety about what our new reality would look like. Eleanor had made good on her threat. The day after Leo woke up, I'd received formal notice that his private school tuition would not be paid for the upcoming term. The supplemental income that had helped with our rent had also been cut off. I hadn't yet had time to figure out what this would mean for our future, but I knew significant changes were coming. Richard arrived to drive us home, his car loaded with groceries and supplies. I figured the last thing you'd want to do is go shopping, he explained as he helped Leo into his booster seat, carefully buckling him in. Thanks, Dad. That's incredibly thoughtful. The drive home was quiet, Leo gazing out the window with wonder, as if seeing the world for the first time. In a way, perhaps he was. Near-death experiences had a way of making everything seem more vivid, more precious, even for a 6-year-old. As we approached our apartment building, I was surprised to see several cars parked outside that I recognized Chloe's compact Jessica's minivan and a few others belonging to friends and neighbors. "What's going on?" I asked Richard, who smiled mysteriously. "A little welcome home committee," he replied. Indeed, when we entered our apartment, we found it transformed. A welcome home. Leo banner stretched across the living room. Balloons and streamers decorated the walls, and gathered in our small space were a dozen people. Friends, neighbors, even Leo's favorite teacher from school, Mr. Harrison. "Surprise!" they called in unison as we entered. Leo's face lit up with delight, though he immediately sought the safety of my side, still feeling vulnerable after his ordeal. Chloe stepped forward, hugging me tightly. "We wanted to show you you're not alone," she whispered. Not for a second. I fought back tears as I surveyed the room. These people, some I knew well, others I'd barely spoken to before Leo's illness, had come together to support us. They'd cleaned the apartment, stocked the refrigerator, and even set up a schedule for meal deliveries over the next 2 weeks. Jessica, who'd given me her number at the hospital, had organized a fundraiser among the parents at Leo's school. "It's not enough to cover full tuition," she admitted, handing me an envelope, "but it might help with the transition." Inside was over $2,000, a stunning amount that would give us breathing room to figure out next steps. Leo's teacher, Mr. Harrison, pulled me aside during this small celebration. "I heard about the tuition situation," he said quietly. "I want you to know the public school in this district is excellent. I have friends who teach there, and I'd be happy to make introductions." The gathering was kept short, everyone mindful of Leo's need for rest. As the last guests left, promising to check in soon, I settled Leo on the couch with his favorite dinosaur documentary. "That was nice," he said sleepily. "All those people came just for me." "For us," I corrected, gently stroking his hair. "They care about both of us." After he fell asleep, Richard helped me move him to his bedroom, tucking him in carefully. "I have something to show you," my father said, once we were back in the living room. He handed me a folder containing legal documents. As I scanned them, I realized they detailed a trust fund in Leo's name. A significant one, funded entirely by Richard. "Dad," I gasped, I can't accept this." "It's not for you to accept or decline," he said firmly. "It's Leo's education fund, and it's already established. There's enough there for private school through high school if that's what you decide is best for him, or it can be used for college later. Either way, it's his future, and it's non-negotiable." I shook my head in amazement. "Does Mom know about this?" "No. I've had a separate account for years that she doesn't know about. I always suspected this day might come, and I wanted to be prepared." He sighed. "The divorce filing goes in next week. I've moved into a small apartment temporarily." "How are you feeling about it all?" I asked. He considered the question carefully. "Sad in some ways. 40 years is a long time to share with someone, but also lighter, like I can finally breathe." He smiled ruefully. "Not unlike Leo, I suppose." 3 days after our homecoming, I received a certified letter from Eleanor's lawyer. I opened it with trepidation, expecting further financial repercussions, or perhaps even threats regarding visitation with Leo. Instead, I found a coldly worded demand for a public apology for my abandonment of family obligations before any reconciliation could be considered. I sat with the letter for a long time, weighing my response. The old Ava would have capitulated, would have apologized just to keep the peace to maintain the financial support to avoid conflict. But that Ava had died in the hospital, watching her son fight for every breath. After careful consideration, I wrote a reply. Not to the lawyer, but directly to my mother. It wasn't angry or accusatory, just clear and firm. I explained that I would always be grateful for the support she had provided in the past, but that our relationship moving forward would need to be based on mutual respect. I detailed Leo's condition during those critical days and expressed my hope that someday she might understand why I had made the choice I did. I ended by saying that while I was open to healing our relationship, it would need to happen with appropriate boundaries in place. I never received a direct response from Eleanor, but 2 weeks later, Sarah called me. "Can we meet for coffee?" she asked. "There's something I want to talk to you about." We met at a cafe halfway between our homes. It was strange seeing my sister outside of a family gathering, just the two of us, as rarely happened. She seemed different somehow, less polished, more authentic. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries and inquiries about Leo's recovery, about Mom, about our family, about everything really. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "When Dad moved out, it was like a bomb went off. Mom's been on a rampage calling everyone telling her version of events. She's even talking about contesting the divorce, though her lawyer apparently told her she doesn't have grounds." I nodded, unsurprised. "The thing is," Sarah continued, "watching all this unfold, seeing how she's behaved, it's made me question a lot of things I've always accepted as normal. The way she uses money to control people, the way she manipulates situations to get what she wants." She looked up at me, eyes shining with unshed tears. "The way she's always pitted us against each other." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "It's a hard realization. I always thought you were the rebellious one." She admitted, the difficult daughter who never appreciated all Mom did for you. That's how she framed it, and I believed her. "But now, I see that you were just braver than me. You tried to live authentically, and I was too afraid to do anything but conform." "We all do what we need to survive," I said gently. "You found your way, and I found mine." "I want to find a new way now," she said firmly. "I want us to be real sisters, not competitors. I want my children to know their cousin Leo. I want—" She took a deep breath. "I want to stop being afraid of disappointing her." It was the beginning of a new relationship between us. Tentative at first, then gradually stronger. Sarah started setting her own boundaries with Eleanor, which predictably caused tremendous friction, but she held firm, supported by her husband Ben, who it turned out had never been comfortable with Eleanor's controlling behavior. 3 months after Leo's hospitalization, we held a small birthday party for him at a local park. It was nothing like the elaborate celebrations Eleanor had always insisted upon. No caterers, no professional decorations, no social climbing guest list. Just dinosaur-themed paper plates, homemade cupcakes, and a handful of Leo's actual friends running wild in the sunshine. Richard came bringing an enormous dinosaur model kit that made Leo squeal with delight. Sarah and her family attended too, her children quickly forming an alliance with their cousin that promised years of adventures ahead. Jessica and her daughter Lily joined us as well, our hospital-formed friendship continuing to grow. As I watched Leo, healthy and vibrant, laughing with his friends, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The past months had brought significant changes. I'd found a better-paying graphic design position that allowed me to continue working mostly from home. Leo had transitioned to the public school, where he was thriving with the support of compassionate teachers. We'd downsized some expenses and created a new budget that, while tight, was sustainable without Eleanor's contributions. More importantly, we'd created a new definition of family, one based on love, respect, and showing up when it mattered. Richard visited several times a week, his newfound freedom, allowing him to be the grandfather he'd always wanted to be. Sarah and I spoke regularly, slowly rebuilding a sisterhood that had been stunted by competition and maternal manipulation. Eleanor remained the only holdout, still refusing direct contact, still insisting on apologies and capitulation before any reconciliation could occur. Perhaps someday that would change, perhaps not. I had made peace with either possibility. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Leo presented me with a drawing he'd made at school. It showed a group of stick figures standing together labeled My Real Family. There was Richard Sarah and her family, Jessica and Lily Chloe, Mr. Harrison, and at the center, Leo and me holding hands. "Do you like it, Mommy?" he asked anxiously. I knelt down to his level, taking in his earnest expression so full of love and trust. "I love it," I told him. "It's perfect." That night, after tucking an exhausted but happy Leo into bed, I sat on our small balcony, watching the stars emerge. The journey from that terrifying hospital room to this moment of contentment had been difficult, filled with painful choices and necessary endings. But it had also brought unexpected beginnings, deeper connections, and a freedom I'd never known before. Sometimes I realized the hardest choices reveal the truest priorities. Sometimes a crisis shows us not just who others really are, but who we are as well. And sometimes, when we finally stop trying to earn love that's always been conditional, we discover just how much genuine love has been around us all along. Has someone in your life ever asked you to choose between them and someone you love? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is every bit as important as the family we're born into.